Welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. We just went over game number 1 between Sase and herO. Again, if you miss any of this content, you miss the Winter Exhibition matches, you weren't able to catch all of the MLG Winter Championships at Dallas, you want to see some of the comment of the day, some of the top 5s, etc., youtube.com/official MLGSE2. Tons of content there, all free in 1080p quality. So anytime you ever are at a lack of SE2 content, go check out our YouTube. There's so much stuff there. Browse through it. You can sort by most viewed. You'll be most likely to find all the most popular stuff that way. A lot of awesome content. Go check it out. If you like it, give us a subscribe, and we'll notify you when we put more content up there, which is pretty much on a daily basis. So getting on to herO versus Sase game number 2. A couple things we're going to look at is the fact that you can't have your cake, you need it too. That's something, proverb, I'm sure you guys have heard it. Can't have things two ways is another way to say it. Then utilizing a tech advantage. And this is actually a point, I've gone over how to utilize a tech advantage in several different past rules of engagement. And usually I illustrate how a player utilized it to turn a small advantage into a one game. And here we're actually going to talk about an opportunity where he didn't quite use it well enough, and it turned into almost an even game, and it turned into a scary situation because he didn't capitalize on his advantage. Then we're going to talk about how to buy time to play catch-up in a game, and some techniques you can use to do that. So we're going to jump into this replay. We're going to start over at the 6:30 mark, so let me rewind this just a hair. And the first thing I want to talk about as we play through this is the fact that you can't have your cake and eat it too. What I mean by that is we're going to talk about Sase's build. So he does a nice defense from the gateway pressure. It's the same type of pressure we saw herO do last game. And again, just like last game, he's actually going for the DT rush. What Sase's trying to do is he's trying to expand and deny his opponent his expansion at the same time. And remember how I just said, you're like, but axslav, you just said last game, if you have an advantage, what you should do is you should expand and then deny your opponent their expansion, and that way you're way ahead because you have 2 bases to 1. And that's true if you have an advantage. But if nothing's happened, if you look at the units lost tab, right, it's basically dead even. I mean, Sase has like a 75 resource advantage. That's meaningless pretty much. If it's a very even game, if you're both playing equally greedy, if you try to pressure your opponent and deny their expansion, you're most likely going to take an unfavorable trade because you're closer to the rally point if you're playing against Zerg or Terran. Or against Protoss, you're near to their mothership core, and again, their rally point as far as robo units and target units are concerned. So if it's a very even game, if you try to pressure, you'll usually take unfortunate trades, bad trades for you. So right here is a situation where, actually, if you rewind it just a hair to right when he warped into these DTs, he might have had a chance. Sorry, let's fast forward this again. He might have had a chance right now. So as soon as he sees the force field there, so DTs can't get into main, if he focused his Nexus down right now, maybe he would have killed it or canceled it for the 2 DTs. But maybe he wouldn't have. Had enough life with the Stalkers coming back, additional warp-ins, he probably wouldn't have been able to. So it would have been an unnecessary risk. Instead, he's going to try to warp in and kill this base, and he has additional units coming in here to support, but they're a little ways off. And this is a situation where he's trying to both expand and play aggressive to deny his opponent the expansion. And in an even game, that's usually not going to work because if you look at the army sizes, they're very even, right? He's got a tiny advantage, but there's that mothership core, which helps so much out defensively. And a lot of his resources were in those DTs, which just went down. And now we can see his opponent has the bigger army because the DTs, of course, once they're spotted, can be taken out easily. So great force fields, right? He's going to isolate the Immortal, but yes, he's killing the Immortal, but he just lost, a Zealot, a Stalker. In fact, he's going to almost lose another Stalker. So it was good micro, but it's still not enough to compensate for the fact that even if there wasn't this Photon Overcharge, right? It's still 3 Stalkers that can kite against this forever. One Immortal's about to pop out. He wouldn't really be able to get too much done here. And that's just because they both played equally greedy. But he tried to both expand and macro up as well as it kill his opponent. And that usually results in unfavorable trades. We can see here units lost tab. Before he was ahead by 75, now he's down by 625, right? So unfortunate trades here. The Pawn's going to die, but that would have died anyway, so that's not something you can really factor in there. So if you want to play the game where you'll take expansion and kill your opponent's expansion, if you can get away with that play, you're going to win the game. But you can only get away with it if you have an advantage. So that's how you play when you have a small advantage. It's not how you play in an even game because you're just going to take unfavorable trades. So going into the game, we're just going to fast forward a little bit. And now, of course, herO's slightly ahead because of that situation early game, right? We can see that in the food supply is up by about 7. Not hugely ahead. Slightly ahead, though. And he's going to use that advantage to he's getting ahead in tech, right? He's already going for Colossi, whereas on Sase's end, Sase is just cranking out gateway units, going for charge, going for trying to get the robo so you can get observers in case of DTs. Basically, both players just macroing up off of 2 bases. As we fast forward here, we're going to get to a point where herO is the one with the tech advantage, and that's because Colossi plus gateway units will beat Archons plus gateway units. Because Colossi are like better versions of Archons as far as anti-ground is concerned. Archons had the advantage of being able to shoot air and not being vulnerable to anti-air attacks. But in a situation like this, that's not really relevant. So at this point in the game, in fact, I think I skipped ahead just a little bit. At this point in the game, 12:30, we're in a situation where if you take a look at the army sizes, herO has a stronger army, but of course, he also has resources in the robo and the rally, so maybe on Sase's side of the map, it might be more or less even. He still has army advantage. That's important. And his army is much more cost efficient. He has a tech advantage. So when he has his tech advantage, what he wants to do is he wants to make trades that'll be in his favor before his opponent catches up on tech. So what herO should be doing is keeping an eye on Sase and saying, you know what? I'm going to see what Sase's up to with my observer. As soon as he tries to go for either air units or Colossi, either of which will equalize the army composition. Right now, herO has a better army composition. He has a better tech. Colossi plus Zealot versus just basic gateway units with some Archons. Colossi is always going to win. So right now, herO has the advantage. But what he wants to do is keep tabs on Sase. As soon as Sase tries to catch up on tech, that's when herO wants to try to make the engagements that are favorable before his opponent catches up. So going forward here, of course, he also could be denying a third base because he has a tech advantage. And this tech advantage isn't in mobility. It's not in tricky play. It's just a tech advantage that reflects in having a better army. Because Colossi, you can't do anything tricky with them. If you want to utilize the tech advantage, it means you have to pound your opponent in the face and use your stronger units. So ideally, he would have actually denied that third base as well because he did have the stronger army. But it's still okay. He still has, his third is a little slower, but he still has a much better army. And as time goes on, until his opponent makes moves to catch up, he's going to have that strong army. But eventually, his opponent will catch up. So ideally, right now, let's take a look at this unit tab. Right now, Zealot counts are roughly even. It's Colossi versus, Archons versus Colossi. That massively favors herO. So right now, he wants to go in, kill the third base. Remember how I said if you're ahead by some amount, he's actually ahead enough he could probably just A-move and win the game. Maybe, maybe not. A good flank might catch him off guard. Who knows? But he's definitely ahead enough that if he hits, he could attack the third from an angle where he can't be flanked and easily take that out. And then it's 3-base at 2, and going forward, he'll be even more ahead. But if he sits back, right? If he sits back and does nothing with his advantage, what we can see happen, Sase is building a robotic support bay. He also could be building 2 Stargates. Who knows? But as time goes on, if Sase can get a bunch of his own Colossi out in the field, all of a sudden it's an even game, right? We can take a look at upgrades. In fact, Sase, they both have 1 attack. Sase has charge. He's trying to catch up and charge, but Sase has a slightly faster +2 weapon. So as time goes on, you know, Sase will be a little bit lower in Colossi count, but as long as he has some Colossi, he might be ahead in upgrades, and I'll kind of counterbalance it. He might have a couple extra Archons, who knows. But right now, herO has a significant advantage that will go away as soon as his opponent catches up in Colossi tech or switches to air tech, something to deal with the Colossi or counterbalance that effect. So right now, it's in a situation where Sase is the one who wants to buy time, right? herO probably should have just killed him by now. But because herO's playing extra safe, he's scared of losing. He just lost game 1. He doesn't want to lose game 2 either. He's playing a little too conservatively. And this is something, like I said, just because you have an advantage doesn't mean the game's over, right? herO hasn't won this game yet by any means. Yes, he's ahead. And yes, he could win if he took the appropriate measures. But if he doesn't, Sase can try to keep him busy. He's warping it over here at domain, attacking here. Sase's army, Sase wants to keep his army right here, right? And the reason he wants to stay in this part of the field is because that way, if herO tries to attack him, which way does he run? He runs to the right side of the map. And why would you run to the right side of the map? Why would you run over here instead of back to your base? because he wants to avoid a fight. Remember, right now, herO has a tech advantage, and that tech advantage is expressed by having a stronger army. As time goes on, his army will get weaker. So Sase needs to avoid a fight, which means threatening counterattacks, which means keeping his army over on the right side of the map, so that if herO attacks down towards Sase, Sase counterattacks, and base trades are unpredictable. Who knows who's going to come out on top? herO doesn't want to risk that. If herO runs towards Sase's army, Sase can retreat without bringing herO closer to Sase's bases, because as soon as herO gets close to Sase's bases, those bases become vulnerable. So buying time, keep your army off to a side corner so that if your opponent goes after it, you're not forced back towards your own bases. You never want to lead your opponent to your bases if you're trying to buy time. So unfortunately, Sase is actually starting to retreat back a bit. And ideally, he wouldn't be retreating back, because right now, if herO can push him back towards his base, if they engage, herO wins. There's just nothing around it, right? I mean, the army size here is ahead in, but even more importantly, it's the composition. 5 Colossi versus 0, right? So Sase needs more time. So luckily for him, herO decides to turn around, which is interesting choice there. But he's able to buy more time. Ideally, he could have forced buying more time, while instead of moving down to his army, kept it poised up in the top section of the map, and then running around in circles. If he can run around in circles in the middle, he can always maintain the threat of a counterattack without being driven towards his base. And now we can see he's trying to catch up in tech by going triple robo. A lot of people say maybe he should go a bunch of Stargates instead of robos. That's a valid argument, but that's almost a side point. The idea is he's trying to catch up and get a composition that can fight heroes. Stargates are great, or even just trying to match Colossi, that can work too. But either way, he needs to buy time to get that. He should keep his army ideally positioned to counter at the third base, so that if herO ever moves down, he can come and attack the third base. If herO tries to attack his army, he can move way to the right side and just keep running around in circles in this pattern and never and avoid engagements until he can catch him in Colossi count. Unfortunately, he retreats back to his base, which means herO now has a chance to force an engagement. And right here, we're in a position where look at the army size again, right? herO still has a bigger army, but Sase's been able to catch up a little bit. So it's 3 Colossi now to, or 4 Colossi now to 8. And that's not nearly as bad as 0 to 4. 4 to 8 is a battle Sase could theoretically win with great positioning, great flanks. 0 Colossi to 4 is one that's almost impossible to win, barring, massive air units or something like that. So Sase, because herO's been so passive, Sase's been able to get back in the game. But because Sase stopped trying to buy time, he wasn't able to even up the situation. Ideally, he would have bought more time to trade away more of his zealots and gatch up and get, 6, 7, 8 Colossi, or try to get some air units in. By a little more time, 1 or 2 more minutes, he would have been fine. Unfortunately, not able to quite buy enough time to get even, but is able to buy enough time to make it much closer. So coming into the battle, what's his advantage? His advantage is basically the fact that he's closer to his pylon warp in spots, right? They both have relatively the same amount of warp gates. He actually has 2 more, so Sase has a slight warp gate advantage. And the other advantage he has a warp prism. He can get ready to flank his opponent. His opponent has nowhere to warp in really close. He's got, he actually doesn't have anything really close. So his opponent doesn't have a warp prism either. So warp ins will be in his favor, and that might be an equalized situation. So going forward here, Sase is again going to try to buy a little bit of time, and then when he does engage, notice the key thing here, he does select his warp prism to go behind his opponent. And what's very important about that is if you look at the zealot count, he's got 29 zealots. That's a lot of zealots. Ideally, he'd have less and a few more Colossi. But if you have that many zealots, if you can try to get in flanks, it's going to make it much, much, much more effective. So going forward here, yes, the 8 Colossi will kill his zealots faster, and his 4 Colossi will kill the opposing zealots. But with the great warp in here, right, he great time warps again to force the Star Step back. The Archons and Immortals are helping tank. He's able to get a little more done, taking out a single Colossi, and actually can start pushing Sase back because Sase didn't have that, herO didn't have that warp in. Now herO brings in the warp prism to get that warp in. Once that comes in, he'll force Sase back. And that's going to be unfortunate for Sase because they did make that engagement before Sase was able to even up the Colossi count, right? So he was able to get the flank in and stay alive in the battle, but he wasn't able to buy enough time to get an even Colossi count, so going forward, the trades are going to get worse and worse and worse for him as long as herO doesn't back up and let him utilize his force. So he's stuck here back up. herO's going to move in here, try to take out the third. DTs are attacking. And why is herO not committing to move down here? Right, why is herO, let's pause this here. Oops. Oh, there, we'll pause it right there. Why is herO not moving into to basically attack the third base? Well, the reason is because if herO moves down here, right, he'll be in the position where all his units will be attacking buildings, right? In PvP or PvE anything, I'm sure if you're a Protoss player out there, you've encountered this problem against Terrans when trying to attack the third base. If you have a mixed army composition, especially with Colossi, ideally you don't want to fight in someone else's base until you're trying to kill them. Like once you kill their army, you can chase them to their base. But if it's relatively even forces, the disadvantage of fighting inside the base is a lot of your units will be distracted killing buildings. So that's why herO, instead of moving his whole army to kill third, is sending a small segment down. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to force Sase to fight him out in the open. Because if he can fight out in the open, he's going to win. Because, I mean, we can look at the unit count. He's got a bigger army. But if they fight in a closed base like this, if the Colossi are busy attacking different buildings, all of a sudden it's a totally different story. And that's about that Sase might be to make a comeback. So going forward here, we see he's trying to harass the base to force Sase to come out. Sase saying, I'm not going to come out. I use DTs to defend. And then going forward, he's going to send Observer in. He's sending the army in, but notice he backs out as soon as he's aware that Sase might come out. So he sends an army in for a second, then he backs out. He's wary to fight near buildings, so he's going to keep his Observer. As soon as Sase makes it move, he's going to make sure that the battle doesn't happen inside the base. And in fact, now he's actually going to try to move in, do some more damage. As soon as he saw Sase move out, he was ready to fight outside the base again. So he's not going to bet too much killing buildings until he's near enough. He's like, okay, I'll focus down this Nexus, then run away. Right? Unfortunately, he ran away one volley too early. But it's okay, because all he has to do is run in there with a few Zealots, finish that off. Against only one Zealot, not able to quite get it. But you see how reluctant herO is to fight near buildings, because the buildings can do a lot of tanky damage. At the end of the day, though, he adds the extra army size. As soon as Sase decides to fight him in the open, it's going to be a one game for herO. herO's moving in here, and Sase doesn't want to let him battle over there, so Sase takes the fight in the open. The superior Colossi count is actually just going to be too much. And while Sase pushes him back at first because all the Zealots ran the wrong way, once the next Warpin of Meat Shield comes in, the greater Colossi count is going to basically make its effect known, and Sase is going to end up losing this game just from too many units from herO. So a lot went on in that game. A lot went on. herO's about to win this in about 10 seconds. A couple of things to note, very important. One is, don't try to, you can't have the cake and eat it too. You can't do both, right? If you eat it, it's not there, so you don't have it anymore. If you're trying to expand at the exact same time as your opponent, you're trying to tech just as fast as your opponent, you can't go in and commit to pressure to kill them, right? It just can't be done. Unless you can way out micro them, you don't want to rely on that against a player of herO's caliber. So don't try to be too crazy with doing everything at once. The next really important thing is if you're ahead in tech, try to make sure that you hit a significant engagement before your opponent catches up in tech. herO would have had a very easy game if he attacked anywhere between the 12 and 15 minute mark. As it went out, he still was able to win it, but it came very close, very tricky. It was a lot closer of a battle, and Sase had a couple chances where if herO didn't micro his Colossi just right, they would have been overrun by the Charged Lot Immortal Archon Colossi forces Sase. So it became a much closer battle. Then, of course, the last thing is, if you're trying to buy time to catch up in tech, your army should be poised not between your base and theirs, but off to the side, so that if your opponent comes after your army, when you retreat, you're not stuck retreating back towards your own base. Thank you guys for watching this segment of Rules of Engagement. We'll take a short break, but then beyond to analyze the fourth game of the series of herO versus Sase.